10 years, and as you can hear, I have an accent. I'm originally from Switzerland, came to the United States around 4 years ago. But when I started at Open Systems, I started on the post-sales side in customer success. And back then, what we sold, we call it hybrid secure WAN, because SASE, what we're going to talk about today, didn't exist as a term. SD-WAN didn't exist as a term, but Open Systems was already doing it, and over time, we kind of like found that niche. So I started on the customer success side, transitioned into sales engineering, came to the United States to run the sales engineering team, and then with the start of this year, I actually took over all of sales for Open Systems here in the United States. So thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So Roman, tell us why you're here.
Yes, so I actually looked it up just before. 1975, Bill Gates founded Microsoft, and in 1980, he put a vision into Microsoft saying, like, we want to put a computer on every desk in every home. Now, I think when he said that, he didn't consider that the environment is going to change. So if you think about that today, our computers are not just at home on our desks anymore. They're obviously in our offices, but most of the time they're mobile. So we fold them up, we take them to Starbucks, we take them home, we take them on an airplane, right? And they fit in the palm of our hand, so everyone has a smartphone. So that computer completely changed on how we do business nowadays, right? So all the users in your organizations, they have devices that they use. And on the other side of the spectrum, our data and applications are not on floppy drives anymore. They are in data centers, they are in the cloud, they're infrastructure as a service, in the internet. And over the past couple of years, the industry has had to find a way of how can we connect all these users to all these applications. And what happened is something like you see on the screen, right? We addressed point problems with point solutions. So through the digital transformation, we said, we need to change away from MPLS to SD-WAN. So we found some SD-WAN to do that. Then we said, oh, now we are connected to the internet. We have to put a firewall in there. And we found another point product to solve a point solution to solve a point problem by putting a firewall in there. And the same we did with secure web gateways and so on, right? And what happened is we ended up with a very complex environment to connect these users to these applications and to that data. And that's basically why Gartner a couple of years ago came up with a new term called SASE, and that's a way of addressing this challenge.
So with all this complexity, our data all over the place, our users accessing it from multiple devices and locations, all this complexity, I'm sure this resonates with a few organizations and a few people out here. Tell us how Open Systems can help address this challenge.
Yeah, so if we look at this chart, going from left to right, what we did in the past was solving, as I said, point problems with these point solutions, point products, right? We put in a firewall, SD-WAN, and so on. A couple companies have quickly realized that they should offer a comprehensive portfolio. There's a couple of really good players out there that have consolidated many of these point products into what we could call a product bundle, right? And sometimes you get like a single pane of glass to manage that and so on, but it's still not that. There is a piece missing when it just comes to like having a comprehensive portfolio. It's about the unification. So you want to make sure that the technology you're using was actually built from the ground up with the intent to work together. You want to have a comprehensive but also unified portfolio stack and service stack. And there is only a couple companies left in that area which provide, I would say, a service around SASE. And then last but not least, customers should expect not just a service, but an experience that's easy to use, right? And that's really where Open Systems has focused on a lot over the past couple of years, making that service available as an experience for our customers.
So help us understand, where exactly does Open Systems fit in with this?
So what we came up with is SASE, Secure Access Service Edge. We were super happy when Gartner finally came up with that term because it felt like we had a home. But then many companies started to put a SASE sticker on everything, and we had to differentiate ourselves. So we went back and figured out what is it that we do. And what we named it Managed SASE, and we really want to provide a comprehensive, unified, and easy-to-use service to be able to provide that SASE experience, right? For the people that are not very familiar with SASE, right, it basically is a combination of the networking side and the network security side. These are just a couple of bullet points. It's not a final chart of everything we do, but it's about SD-WAN to connect locations, remote access to connect remote users if they sit at Starbucks or at home, multi-cloud, because many organizations are not just in Azure, they're also in AWS or in GCP or somewhere else. And then the connectivity, right, the underlay, the ISP lines that you need for that. And then on the security side, the second part to that is Zero Trust Network Access, Secure Web Gateway, CASB, Firewall, all these security functions. And that all comes together in what we call mission control, and then we'll talk about that a little more in our 24/7 operations.
Yeah, so our theme here today is really going beyond technology. We've talked a lot about the network technologies, transformation, wrapping security into that. How does Open Systems put the service in SASE?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was very happy when I saw the theme of this year's event, because going beyond the technology was always our mission, right? I would classify Open Systems as a service company that happens to have a SASE technology stack to be able to provide the service we do, right? Which at the end is connecting users to applications wherever they are. But in this big environment of SASE players, we had to figure out, okay, how do we differentiate? And for us, it's going beyond the technology, making sure we onboard this technology properly, operate it on a 24/7 basis, and make sure we develop it over time through our customer success team.
So you said SASE reduces all this complexity. Isn't the onboarding for this like super easy? Isn't it just a click of a button? You just like push a button and it's done?
If we have a greenfield, then yes, 100%.
Who has that luxury these days?
That's exactly the point, right? If we go back and we say, oh, there's an SD-WAN from player A, and the firewall from player B, and the SWIG from player C, there's a lot of complexity. Sure. And if we want to take a customer through that transition, Open Systems really needs to understand, where is the customer today, where are all of you today, and where do you want to be tomorrow? And that allows us to really work with you through workshops to figure out how we do the configurations of the policies, but also how do we deploy all the gateways that we need, the hardware, for the physical locations or virtual in the cloud. How do we do all the lines and so on? So there's a lot of project management involved, a very involved process for us to understand what we need to do. Yeah, so onboarding is an absolutely critical part for us to make sure we bring you, and technology doesn't just become shelfware like we have seen many times before.
Really helps enable the success of everybody there, is doing a good job, the whole planning and designing, rolling it out in a nice structured way. I'm curious, for those here, by a show of hands, who's never had a bad experience calling support? Okay, I kind of figured it would be the case. I think we've all had our horror stories. So what's the key to a successful operation?
So I want to actually tie you back to the keynote session from this morning, because it was very impressive to hear firsthand from an astronaut. Now, imagine a situation. Leo Melvin is up there working on the space station, and they have an issue, and they call Mission Control, Houston, we have a problem. Now imagine Houston works like your typical support organization. Melvin's on the phone, level 1, how can I help you?
Have you turned it on and off again?
Yeah. He explains his issue. It's like, oh, I'm not exactly sure how to do that. Let me connect you to level 2. Yeah, then they help him, maybe not, and then ultimately he gets escalated to level 3 and finally has someone who can help him with a problem. It's not really an acceptable experience if you're an astronaut floating around in space. And our question was like, why should this be an acceptable state for any organization out there? Why should any organization accept that you call into support and you have to go through level 1, level 2, level 3, until you finally get to a point where someone is actually able to help you. We always say, like, how is it possible that that's an acceptable model? So when Open Systems set out to provide managed service, like over 20 years ago, we really thought about how do we want to provide operations in a way that we can provide a much better experience for our customers, right? So there's a couple of key aspects to that, and we looked a lot at NASA and how they are doing things. So one of the key aspects is obviously training. All our engineers at Open Systems, they go through around 400 hours of training to get what we call mission control certified, because we went as far as calling our operations center mission control. So they go through a lot of training to understand our own services and how we are able to help our customers. The second aspect, and that's something that NASA is doing as well, we do not have designated support engineers. No one at Open Systems works full-time in support, in mission control, right? What we do is every engineer at Open Systems, that includes development, customer success, sales engineering, operations engineer. Every engineer at Open Systems goes through that training and then provides 15 to 20% of their time per week in operations. Now, I told you I started out in Michigan at Open Systems 10 years ago as an engineer. So while I'm now heading the sales team here, I'm still part of the operations organization. And so are 4 C-levels at Open Systems, because they came up through the ranks at Open Systems. They started as engineers, they go mission control certified, and then they worked their way up, and now they are in the C-level position, but they still do mission control. So that DevOps model is absolutely critical. And if we look, I mean, our astronaut this morning didn't point out the TV show For All Mankind, but I'm a big fan of that TV show because it illustrates very well how people in mission control work together. These are the rocket engineers, the people that designed the space shuttle. They actually work in mission control when the astronauts are up there. And that's literally what we are doing. It's our engineers, our customer success people, sales engineers that work in operations to be able to help our customers.
Yeah, I can't think of many other organizations that such a large part of everybody has their hands in supporting and understanding the technology and supporting their customers. That's really unique.
Yeah, it's I would say one of our key differentiators. Now the last part is, how are we able to sustain a model like this? Because while it is obviously an amazing feedback loop, we had to figure out how do we make sure we are able to provide this level of support also at night. Because we were based in Europe back then, we had most of our customer base in Europe, and then we had to do night shifts. And our founder back then said, like, yeah, that's not a really cool way of doing it. So we set out to build a follow the sun model. Back then, we opened up an office in Sydney, Australia, because that was perfect from a time zone difference. And then over time, we expanded. We came to the United States a couple of years ago. So now we provide operations out of Europe, out of Switzerland, and then we have a small outpost in Honolulu, Hawaii. Now, all these DevOps engineers, they get the opportunity to go to Hawaii for shifts of 2 to 3 months. And from a retention perspective, I can only suggest to any company out there to do that. I personally had the opportunity to get dispatched to Sydney 3 times and once to Honolulu, Hawaii. So it's an extremely valuable experience, but also a way for us on how we can keep this level as high as we can to be able to provide an experience to our customers.
Yeah, a great way to retain talent, grow them, and I'm sure like you mentioned, the retention rate is you got long-standing tenure there. So
yeah. So the picture that you see is not a stock image. It's actually an image from our operations center out of Zurich, Switzerland. So many years ago, we thought, like, how can we visualize what we are doing, how we support our customers? So again, we went back to NASA and we built our mission control center. So this is the one we have in Zurich, Switzerland, with big screens and then desks in front of it. Now, COVID obviously has changed the way we're doing operations, but nevertheless, if you are ever in Zurich, Switzerland, or in Honolulu, Hawaii, give me a call and we can show you around in these offices.
I'll remember that. So Roman, organizations, their environments and requirements are ever changing. We know that that's the one thing that we can count on is that it's going to keep changing. What needs to happen for people and organizations to stay on top?
Yeah, so for us, it's kind of like the third prong, right? I said onboarding is key, then operations, but continuous development is the last part of that. And what we do for that is we designate at least 2, depending on the customer size, 3 or sometimes even 4 customer success engineers to our customers. So what they do, they become like an extension of the customer's team. That means we have weekly, bi-weekly meetings, depending on the cadence that's required, and this team is really there to, let's say, discuss operational topics on how we can improve from an operational level, but also how we can help the customer over time on a strategic level. So one example for that, one of our customers, they had a transition. They wanted to move their on-prem data centers into the cloud. They decided to go with Azure for that, and then they reached out to the customer success team. So they were like, how do we make sure we connect this cloud to the SD-WAN environment, to all our locations worldwide? How do we make sure it is secure from a firewalling perspective? How do we make sure that the internet access is secured and so on? So that was kind of like a project where our customer success team worked very closely with the network and security team to define a roadmap on how do we go about this transition into Azure, how do we build the landing space, and then help them like lift and shift applications up there. And that's all part of the service, so that was no like additional project that they had to pay for. That's part of what Open Systems and the customer success team wants to do for our customers.
I think sometimes when that's come up in conversations before with customers, you know, they talk with one group and then it kind of falls flat. It sounds like not only you guys pick that up, but maybe there's a little bit something else more under the hood that goes into that as well.
Yeah. Let's actually get a bit more specific and let's talk about an actual journey of one of our customers towards the cloud, right? We can be generic here, but at the end of the day, this is exactly what we're doing for our customers. So just imagine the picture we saw in the beginning, just flipped 90 degrees. Now you have all the users at the bottom, right? This organization had a headquarters. They had multiple branches around the United States and internationally, and they had traveling users, right? So that was kind of like the foundation. And then their applications were already everywhere. And that was kind of like the challenge they had in the beginning because they went through a lot of this transition already, but didn't really have an underlying structure in place that supported that. So they had applications in infrastructure as a service, they had still an on-prem data center, they leveraged SaaS applications, and obviously the internet. So for us, it was really understanding where they are today, and then we helped them through that transition. What you see next to the branch is like our box. So we have what we call the service delivery platform. That's our hardware appliance that we can deploy to branches or to headquarters or data centers. And then on the top left, we have infrastructure as a service where we have the exact same appliance, but just virtualized. And in this speaking bubble next to it, you see like this box, the service delivery platform, runs all our services. So the SD-WAN to connect all these branches, the firewall to secure not just the location, but all the traffic out of it or into it, the secure web gateway, zero trust network access, and so on, right? So that's really the key, that the intelligence, while controlled out of the cloud, really resides on our box on site, and that's how we are able to provide our services directly at the customer's office and make sure that the user experience is extremely high because you don't have to like backhaul traffic through like the cloud or somewhere else. Yeah.
I think it also gives you an opportunity. One thing that I didn't see on the slide was, you know, if anybody out in the audience works in an environment where there's a lot of IoT or OT devices, I feel like because you have that device on premise, you have additional capabilities. Yep. Maybe tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, so this became a huge topic for us during COVID, right? And the reason was everyone was sent home, but we have a lot of customers in manufacturing and other industries where it was just not possible to work from home because you have like these little human-machine interfaces where people punch in instructions for their machines, their robots, and what they're supposed to do. So the whole IT-OT convergence that we're going through with infrastructure 4.0 and whatnot, that's a huge topic for us. And the fact that we have these firewalling capabilities on our appliances locally is a huge differentiator for us, because if you want to go from one segment at a location to another segment at the location to control a robot and get data in and out, you cannot afford going through like a cloud firewall or whatever, right? So this is a huge benefit of our technology stack on how we can support our customers and help them segment these IT and OT environments. The second aspect to it is the access to these OT environments. So when we were sent home in beginning of 2020, these factory workers, they couldn't go home, right? But the industry kind of like found a way to address that. And Zero Trust Network Access is one of the ways on how this can be addressed. Now, again, the fact that we have these boxes on site allows us to enable access to these environments in a very secure way. So what we can do is, if there is, for example, a Honeywell machine or a Siemens PLC or whatever, we can now define that as an application, and then within the CTNA policy, we can define users that are allowed to access that. So now all of a sudden, that human-machine interface that the factory worker was using is exposed via RDP through the browser to a remote worker sitting at Starbucks, if they want that. Most don't, they still have some restrictions in place. But theoretically, you can have your human-machine interface wherever you are, and you can interact with that. And that's obviously super interesting for third-party maintenance contracts, right? If you have all these machines, they need to be maintained. Now, traditionally, you gave them a laptop with your VPN. They had to connect in. Now they're flat in the network, and so on. So like a lot of risks, and CTNA is really a way of how we were able to support our customers to do that. Now, one of the biggest projects Open Systems is running at the moment is redesigning the shop floor. It's what they call their factories in 140 locations, where Open Systems traditionally was only doing the edge. So we did the SD-WAN, the edge firewalling, all of that. And now we put in a second pair of service delivery platforms to do the IT-OT segmentation from a firewalling perspective, and then the access to the OT environment through Zero Trust Network Access.
Yeah, that's really great to understand. We've definitely had a lot of ZTNA, that Zero Trust Network Access conversations. You're telling us a little bit of how you're adding more value, giving the customers additional capabilities and really changing things up. Is there anything else around ZTNA?
Yeah, so CTNA is definitely one of the biggest buzzwords in the industry right now, but I'm always a bit skeptical when it comes to buzzwords. But to me, CTNA is actually a valid one. It's there's a lot of merit behind that buzzword, right? So besides the OT access we just talked about, one of the key use cases that can be addressed with CTNA is remote access. We're all familiar with the remote access that you have to punch in your credentials, and then you have captive portals and it's not working and so on. So it's not a very efficient way or a very nice way for your users to work remotely, right? And CTNA addresses this to kind of like a replacement of your traditional remote access VPN, where you just, instead of giving someone access to your environment, you only expose the applications they need through CTNA, and then you have policies that say Roman is allowed to use application A, Ryan is allowed to use application B, and so we don't really need to backhaul traffic to a VPN concentrator anymore, but we can basically straight go through to these applications through CTNA, right? So
And
That's
even just the amount of time that they need the application for and nothing else. So you don't have it for 2 weeks when you only need it for maybe an hour.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? I mean, there is a lot of possibilities you have within a CTNA policy. So it can be just-in-time access.
Yep.
You can say, for example, a third party needs to request access, and then if I'm a supervisor, I can say, yes, this access is granted.
So a whole ticket workflow, and somebody approves it, and then it enables the account and disables it after time.
Exactly, yeah.
Throwing in automation, love it.
And you can even go as far as interacting with someone else's session if you are the supervisor. Again, like if you have Honeywell that needs to maintain, then you can see what they're doing, and you can even take recordings of it. So from a chain of evidence perspective, or
training, all sorts of different
like
uses
all of these things, right? There's a lot of stuff you can do, right? Now, another use case which is really interesting when it comes to CTNA is mergers and acquisitions. Now, mergers and acquisitions for IT organizations traditionally have been challenging because usually you're the last one to hear about them, and then you're supposed to execute them within like no time. And CTNA is a very interesting way for organizations to go about M&A activity. What I mean by that is we often describe it as like a traffic light. So day one, you are informed that there is an acquisition. We are in a red state. There's absolutely zero connection between the acquired company, entity, and you. Now, as an IT organization, you have to be very quick in integrating this organization into your environment. And CTNA is one way of doing that, because what we can do on day one very quickly is create users for all these acquired entity. And then we just expose the applications that they need via CTNA. Again, they don't need a laptop from the organization, they just need a browser. There is no way that the acquired company's laptop can bring malware into your environment, because the only thing you do is expose the application. There is no tunnel back or anything. So that's a very easy way. And then for an IT department, you have a lot of time after that to think about how do we want to fully integrate this organization. So to go from a yellow state where they have CTNA access into a green state where they're fully integrated with SD-WAN, with firewalls, with all the SASE services to make sure they're integrated, yeah.
Yeah, a good way to manage that change, give them just what they need when they need it for however long, and then kind of peel back the onion on everything else that's left. So, as we're getting close to wrapping up, does anybody have any questions for Roman? I'd be happy to jump down and throw a mic down there. Anybody? All right. Well, maybe as you're wrapping up, there will be one. I'll keep watch.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, wrapping up. For us, again, like what's really important is we see ourselves as a service company and not as a technology company, and that's the huge difference, right? I was very interested, it was for me very interesting to see when Matthew was talking this morning about the values of C3, and it resonated a lot with what Open Systems is doing. We are not like a super hyper scaling organization, because what we do is we provide a service with a lot of resources that we bring to the table to make sure we are able to provide an experience to our customers. And if this is something that's interesting to you and your organizations, then meet us at the booth upstairs, or approach me afterwards. We'd be happy to answer some questions that you're too shy to ask in public.
Thanks, Roman. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot.